Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can check out the radio version of the show every Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern on WDJY 99.1 in Atlanta. We also air on a podcasting network in Los Angeles called the 405 Media. There's a TV version of the show that airs on KMVT 15 in Silicon Valley at 8 p.m. Pacific on Tuesday nights. Both versions of the show air in other states. For these show times, plus past episodes, please visit the show's website at buildingthefutureshow.com. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Scott Park. He's the Chief Revenue Officer and co-founder at Tab. Scott, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I think, your background and kind of what you're currently doing, for me anyway, I found really kind of fascinating, and I think is really actually kind of innovative in the advertising kind of space. But maybe before we get into all that fun stuff, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I'm a Los Angeles native, born and raised. I haven't been here, too much because I travel quite a bit. Spent some time in Vietnam, spent some time in Korea.
Oh, wow.
But mainly in the U.S., here in Los Angeles.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So you went to university. What did you end up taking in university, and why did you decide to take it?
I started off doing a lot of different things. Being a young guy, you try to figure out where to go.
Sure.
Try to dabble a little bit in the film world, and then finally just took up management because I felt like it was a pretty good overall encompassing type of field.
Okay.
Spent some time at Cal State Northridge.
Okay.
Actually went to University of Wisconsin for a little bit, decided that the cold weather wasn't for me, and came back and finished up here.
Okay, interesting. So you graduate. What did you kind of end up doing after school? Like, you've done a ton of stuff, so maybe kind of quickly walk us through that and maybe some of your career highlights at some of the different companies you worked at.
Sure, yeah. So I did a lot of consulting when I was a little bit younger. Did some real estate development, in fact, and when that market just took a nosedive in the 90s, I figured it'd be good to get into something I really enjoyed, which was gaming at the time.
Okay, interesting.
I joined a Korean gaming company called Endors. Did their business development and their monetization and some of the marketing there. And that's where I really got a feel for, I guess the digital advertising space, as you call it.
Sure.
Dealing with offer walls back in the day. And
yeah, I remember those days.
How to monetize. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Monetize those users. And back then there was only a few. And, I just thought it was really interesting to see that, literally you turn on this offer wall and it just generates, 20% of your total revenue. And I thought that was pretty amazing. I got into it that way.
Interesting. Okay. So walk me through kind of a few other things up until kind of Tab, and then we'll get into that.
Sure. So after spending some time at Endors, as I mentioned, I found a real interest in the digital advertising space of monetization, and I joined a company called Sponsored Pay, which is now called Fiverr.
Okay, sure.
I was probably one of the early on members, number 2 in the U.S. here, and I was an account manager, but also doing business development at the same time. During that time, it was still relatively web. Mobile was really, really new. Feature phones were really, really new as well. And so during that time, a couple of some of the veterans at Sponsor Pay decided to kind of build out, or I helped build out the mobile platform.
Okay, interesting.
Bringing some really big clients to the table, predominantly now they're big, but Comtois and Gameville. Also, the Korean Creative Content Association was really interested in doing something in the U.S., so they brought that on board as well. And then from Sponsor Pay, it just kind of flurried from there because of mobile. Joined Game Genetics, which is another German company, and started working with them a little bit. But also spent some time with a Korean game advertising company called AppDisco.
Okay.
I was an MD here in the U.S. Unfortunately, things went the wrong way with some investments that I took on, and that had to fold. But it was a good learning experience.
Yeah, I think in some cases when a company kind of shuts down, you almost learn more from kind of the failures than sometimes the successes.
Yeah, it was a painful experience. I remember that.
Sure.
just being newly married, trying to get through things, it was a very painful experience. But I realized that it kind of made me reassess, where I wanted to be, where I wanted to go, the companies I wanted to work for. So that was good. And after that, as I mentioned, I joined GameGenX, was an MD here for a little bit. Unfortunately, that company actually had the same problem because technology-wise, they were a little bit behind. A great team, great CEO, great staff. It just, the timing was wrong for them. They just got in the market a little bit late.
Okay, interesting.
And then finally, I went back to the user acquisitions gaming space, and I worked as the VP of user acquisitions for a very large Korean gaming company called NHN.
Okay.
A lot of people don't know who they are, but their claim to fame, or originally they're part of Naver, which is Korea's largest search portal engine.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and people always try to hit me up with basically trying to work with us on various gaming UA spends. I think we spent quite a bit of money globally. And I had a team about 8 at the time, but we controlled all the budgets for all the game launches, launching like 3 games a month. It was
wow,
intense.
That's insane, actually.
Yeah, it was pretty intense it was very intense for about a year, where we was just launching everything we could get out there, and it was also a learning experience as well. And then I decided, okay, well, if I stay in this space, will I enjoy myself? Where was it at the happiest? What point was I the happiest?
Sure.
And I decided, okay, I reached out to Mateus. Mateus reached out to me. We both, met, and Mateus is the co-founder and the founder of Tab.
Right.
We got together and just said, hey, there's this new venture. Let's start it. I jumped on board, so let's go. And it was all history from there.
Sure. So I'm curious, though, how did the idea of Tab kind of come to be, and how did you guys decide to kind of actually go for it one day?
Well, it was actually accumulated by, I guess it put together by Mateus to start off with, and the team was relatively new.
Okay.
He knew that he needed some presence in the U.S. because it's such a large market.
Sure.
Being a Berlin-based company,
Gotcha.
we kept in contact. He pretty much throughout the idea, I bit. He was excited about it, and next thing you know, we just said, okay, we need to really get on a good foot first. Otherwise, we're going to fail like all the other companies. And we got very, very lucky, taking on some very large Korean clients that I had known in the past,
okay.
And it just went gangbusters from there.
Interesting. So I want to maybe get into that in a couple of minutes, but for people that haven't heard of Tab, what exactly do you guys do?
Okay. Well, Tab is, the simplest form is an agency, advertising agency.
Okay.
But we have quite a bit of technology, know-how, and knowledge behind it. We have a strong media buying team that's internal. We have technology that's a DSP that we've built from the ground up that we're currently utilizing internally only. And we mainly do performance marketing, driving app installs, driving, cost per actions, mostly in the mobile space. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah. So you mentioned some of your kind of first clients were connections. Did you kind of just email them? Did you cold call them? A little bit of both? Like, I'm always kind of curious how people go back to their kind of past relationships and try to monetize and actually get them as clients on something they're working on currently.
Sure. So a lot of begging was involved. I can tell you that.
No, that's good advice, man.
Yeah. A lot of begging, a lot of trying to boost the relationship, and saying, give us a shot. And we were lucky. I had strong enough relationships where they would give us some budget just to test this out and be patient with us.
Okay, so you did charge them at the beginning when they first got on.
Yeah. So performance-based marketing is they commit a budget.
Okay.
We try to spend it as evenly and as quickly as possible with the best quality intentions.
Yeah.
So we got lucky. We did pretty well.
Okay.
Mind you, we did have some hiccups along the way, but we did well, and they liked us, and they continued giving us new IOs for budgets, and that kind of drove the excitement for the company forward.
Interesting. No, I think that's really good advice. So how does, for somebody that's maybe never heard of kind of, how you guys target and stuff like that, And I don't really want necessarily like how you guys do it, like, but from a perspective of like somebody that's maybe never tried this kind of marketing or advertising in
Mm-hmm.
this space, like how do they kind of set up an account and then kind of walk us through kind of how they use the platform and kind of start seeing some results?
Sure, sure. So, mainly we're a managed service. You kind of leave it up to us to deliver the results that you want.
Okay.
When we do start off, we ask quite a bit of questions. We ask about what are important to these UA market buyers or these professionals. They're asking about certain key performance indexes.
Right.
Mainly in the gaming or the mobile advertising space, it's like retention is a critical thing.
Sure.
Day one retention, day three retention. Return on ad spends are very important. Setting certain goals for us to achieve are very important. So all those things are collected.
Okay.
Once it's collected, we use our platform internally to look out certain sources that we think might work
Okay.
based on collecting some data from them, and then we go from there and we fine tune it as we go along. Sometimes it's faster than other times, but
Sure.
we like to think that we do a pretty good job within the first 48 hours. Otherwise,
Okay.
they will probably stop it and stop paying us.
No, that's fair. So, how long traditionally does a campaign kind of last for? Like you said, 48 hours, but is it like, do people usually run them for weeks, months, or does it kind of really depend?
Yeah, it really depends.
Okay.
Some of our branding partners, our advertisers, they have specific start dates and stop dates. So
Okay.
it can be over a summer, it could be a couple of weeks. Where some of our other partners, like on the gaming side, where they're continually spending to keep their, their ecosystem going, the budget almost never ends if they're happy with the quality.
I
One of
gotcha.
our partners have been running with us for over, I would say, 2 years now, and they continue to spend at a pretty even rate.
Okay, interesting. So, for people that are actually, looking to kind of advertise with Tab, how do they kind of sign up for an account? Like, do they just reach out to you, or how does this kind of work?
Yeah, they can just reach out to us. They can go on our website. There's a button that says, if you're an advertiser or affiliate, and you
Okay.
just sign on, read through the terms and conditions. We usually look through the process and who the person is, and see if they're legitimate, what they're about, collect some information, and then we have one of our account managers service or manage that partner.
Okay. No, okay, that's interesting. And then
Mhm.
how if people are looking to kind of monetize, how do you guys kind of help them with that?
Sure. So we have a smart link solution, which is based upon a HTML5 or JS feed that partners can integrate, a very
Okay.
light integration where we can show banners or video to help publishers monetize their traffic.
Okay.
Typically, it's broken down. Most publishers are really concerned about their eCPM value.
Right.
Sometimes we'll guarantee the eCPM, sometimes we won't, but usually they're pretty happy with what we give them in the fill rates.
Okay, interesting. No, that's actually quite fascinating. So I'm curious though, kind of how does the like obviously I don't really necessarily want to know like trade secret type stuff, but you guys obviously had to build a bunch of kind of technology around this. So do they
Mhm.
kind of have like a dashboard that they can log into to kind of check and check in on their campaigns, or do you guys kind of send them
Sure.
updates, or how does that kind of work?
So we do all the above. They have dashboard access to our platform, so they can see how they're performing.
Okay.
But a lot of times, as a managed service, we have account managers that are great that help kind of identify certain trends or transactions or whatnot to help optimize. A lot of
Okay.
times, some advertisers won't even know what they're seeing in terms of data, so we kind of guide them that way. For example, if we think a performance is going better on one placement than another, we'll suggest, hey, why don't we buy more on this placement and kind of cut off these sources so you get better quality.
Right.
Or if we know that they want to scale, we'll just tell them, hey, this has got a lot more scale but less quality. But since scaling is your choice, how about we kind of loosen up on these KPIs to kind of excel that trajectory. So
Okay.
it's a little bit of both, and obviously technology takes place as well. It optimizes initially, and after that it's all semi-manual.
Okay, no, that's interesting. And I think the thing that at least in kind of the other, maybe like some people that are also kind of in this space is you have like kind of real people, right? Actually kind of monitoring this, where I think some of your competitors are just kind of all automated and it's up to like me to watch my own stuff. And to be fair, like sometimes either those people don't have the time or know how, or maybe they don't even really necessarily care. And I don't mean that in the negative way. It's just like they want like a physical person to actually kind of monitor what's happening because they're spending money, right? Like, and they
Absolutely.
want to kind of check in 24, 48 and a couple days or maybe weeks later.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's one of the things that we pride ourselves on. More than being an ad tech company or agency, we're a relationship company.
Okay.
And we're aware that, there's a lot of partners out there that can do the same job we can. But we like to think that the care that we put into our clientele and the importance that we put on the clientele kind of sets us apart. Where we optimize, almost on a daily, probably on a daily basis, multiple times with multiple partners. We look at the data for them. We try to make suggestions, and more than just turning on the technology and going, we kind of try to forecast how the campaign is going to go.
Okay.
And I think that's really important because, one thing I tell a lot of the people and kind of our part of a sales pitch is everybody in our company is a, media buyer, is a UA,
Interesting.
person. We do the same ideas and concepts that these UA people do. And we actually have that strong technology and BI system behind us.
Okay, interesting. So you mentioned kind of early on in the show that you guys kind of have a Berlin office and an LA office, correct?
That's correct. So we have about 4 offices now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, we've grown pretty quickly in about a year.
No, that's
I'm pretty
great, man.
pretty happy about that. Thank
Congrats.
you, thank you, thank you. So we have our headquarters in Berlin, and
Okay.
our LA office here in Santa Monica. We pretty much launched the Berlin office and the Santa Monica office pretty close together. I would say months apart.
Okay.
As I mentioned, we knew that there was a need for some presence in the U.S. And
Sure.
then immediately afterwards, we saw a lot of traction in India. So we opened an office in Bangalore,
Okay.
um, and that kind of serviced that market, still a good emerging market. And
Sure.
then recently we opened our Korea office,
Wow.
and we're building out the team there as we speak right now, and that's in Seoul.
Okay, very cool. So why obviously like you wanted a presence in the US and you kind of touched on it, but just for to kind of reiterate, like why did you decide to put offices in these places? Like you wanted to have physical people that could actually go to client offices or what was the rationale behind kind of actually doing that?
Well, that was a main key factor was having a presence there in the time zone was really key important.
Right.
But also, you know, we think it's really important to have some front-facing interaction. I mean,
Right.
people are hidden behind their inboxes, they're hidden behind Skype all the time, but that interaction is really important. Just having a simple cup of coffee can change the way a client looks at you or the way that they feel their trust is in you. So I think that's really important.
Sure.
But mainly having the presence there to kind of expand and grow as a key point from that region was our main focal point.
Sure. And we talked about this kind of before we recorded. Like I think nothing will beat kind of ever in person kind of time, right? And I think we kind of talked about it before about kind of, where the industry's going. And I think in a lot of cases, just having offices where people can physically meet up is actually kind of making you guys kind of at the top of kind of this industry, right? Because in a lot of cases, the advertising industry has kind of gone through some ups and downs, I would say, probably in the last decade or so, or if not more. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, there's a lot of the companies nowadays are pretty global.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of guys out of San Francisco or Israel or even Asia that have multiple offices in certain locations.
Okay.
So they do have the presence there. They're probably just one-off salespeople or an account manager. They all have the same kind of concept that we do. However, I think what we have that's different is we have people that are physically on the ground, literally going to offices all the time, not just
Right.
being in the time zone in the office and just asking questions. We literally make it a point to go and talk to them, and always talk to them when there's a campaign that needs to be kicked off. We take a lot of pride in that, and I think it's something that the industry is doing right now, and I'm really happy that they're doing it. It just makes our job easier.
No, I 100% agree. And so I'm curious, though, to kind of get your thoughts on the industry, because I think nowadays we can bring a lot more kind of technology and almost like instant stats and kind of, you can pivot almost instantly. What are your thoughts on kind of the industry right now?
Yeah, it's interesting you should ask. The industry is changing quite a bit. I mean, from when I started at my sponsor pay days, it was very wild west. There was no regulation. People were just shooting from the hip, and the whole concept of UA was taken from the website of things and trying to be transposed on the mobile side of things, which was very, dangerous.
Sure.
But I think nowadays there's a convergence of a lot of key players like the Facebooks, the Googles are coming together, owning the full stack, and really setting a lot of transparency for the marketers out there that control these budgets.
Interesting.
That is probably leading the way for a lot of change and shakeup, being that, people want transparency. People want to know what they're buying. And I agree where I believe that, I've read some article where they said out of the whole mobile advertising industry, 50 to 60% account for fraud.
Wow.
And that's pretty scary when you think about that. For every dollar you spend, 60% is just wasted.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't realize it was that high, actually.
Yeah, it could be just someone that said that, but there's a lot of fraud going around. Just recently I read about I think Lotame, which is a very large data provider that identified like a lot of their traffic or a lot of their data was from bots.
Okay, interesting.
And if a big data player like that can admit to that, I mean, you have to assume that the data that they're collecting from advertisers are pretty much the same.
Sure.
And I think that's the number one thing people are looking at nowadays. They want to know that their money is being spent properly, that it's not going to ruin their brand reputation. And there's a lot of different programs out there that kind of help you do that.
Sure. So I'm curious, though, how is kind of technology, for people that don't really understand, kind of making the actual stats that you provide to your clients relevant? Like, is it because you can literally track every, click through or view or what? Like, how does that kind of work for people that don't understand?
Yeah. So, you can pretty much track everything.
Okay.
It's just a matter of, if the advertiser, the publisher, and the tracking system are willing to play together. I mean, there's, a lot of people that can pass, information on the click and the conversion.
Okay.
And that's, all sorts of data from the user agents, the type of phone, the IP address, down to a township. So it collects a lot of information where even some other apps, my partners could collect what apps you already have on your phone. So although it's great for marketing and targeting, it's actually pretty scary to know that, all this information is being passed to something that's kind of insecure, that's not secure. And that's a big concern in the industry right now as well.
No, that's interesting. Yeah, like that's the thing that I've always kind of found a little bit fascinating is like people seem so scared by some of this stuff, but I keep telling them, it's like, this has been happening for decades, just in different forms. It's just getting better now, right? Like,
Right.
I think the best example that I think majority of people can relate to is if all of a sudden in your mailbox one day, like if you find out like you and your wife are having a child or like somebody, or you're pregnant, and you start getting like free samples of baby products or, baby food, it's because you were searching that online or you're using something, right? And then they know to send you physical stuff in the mail. And like some people are always like, well, how does that happen? It's like, well, it's all online or your phone or like it's happening, right? And it's I can see why people kind of get kind of maybe weirded out by some of that stuff, but it's not really any different. It's just a different way to collect information. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's the same tried and true cookie that can, that's placed on your browser or in your system on your PC or Mac, whatever, that kind of, gets that going. it's just a matter of, how it's being used, like you mentioned, and how accurate it is a big thing. It's just, more, it's amazing to see how much technology has grown from the web days to mobile, and how much information is being collected off the mobile. Because back in the day, I mean, a web computer, it will tell you what IP address you're having, what browser you're using, maybe your operating system. But now through mobile, it'll tell you like literally where you're standing,
Yeah.
or what kind of phone you're deciding to use, what kind of operating system. And it's although it seems pretty scary, it's just the way that technology is growing, and I think the advertising space has the best intentions for that.
Sure. Well, and like, I don't know. I don't think I'm in the minority here, where I love the convenience of some of that stuff, right? Like for me,
Oh yeah.
like if I can go somewhere and it pops up on my phone, like here's the menu or the hours, or you're using Google Maps to go somewhere, and it's like the place might be closed, or when you get there, like I like those little conveniences, and I know that's not really necessarily like specifically advertising, but I think people forget about the conveniences that some of this stuff does provide as well.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, it's convenient for the users, but also for, like I mentioned, for advertisers too. It helps us kind of target better to a relevant audience. So
Right.
you'll see something that you might want to see, opposed to, seeing something that you don't. And then the advertiser will be, know that they're targeting the right person to help them better serve the clients.
Sure.
And I think if you look at it that way, it's not so scary.
Sure.
And just like any other industry, whether you buy a car or slide your credit card, there's always chance of someone misusing it.
Sure.
But, it's just the way the world works, I suppose.
Well, but the other thing too, I think, is like a lot of times, a lot of this advertising stuff is like if they give you a coupon or a discount, or I've seen stuff where people do like geofencing stuff around like maybe their competitors. There was like a famous campaign in like South America, I think, where these guys geofenced their like shoe store competitor in a mall, and if you walked within, like if you walked kind of into that store just before you walked in, your app or your phone would send you a notification saying if you get to this other store, and it would start counting down your discount from like basically you'd get it free to like 99% like off, and it went down to zero.
Wow.
Like you could never get there within like 90% off, but you'd get there maybe like 50 or 20%, whatever, right? But it was interesting just how you can actually use it to kind of almost like gamify or actually provide some real value to people, just by letting some of this stuff happen, right?
Right. Absolutely. I think, from advertisers and from guys like us, it's really important to drive the content to the user to make sure that they're seeing something that they want to see that's relevant. And that geofencing is a perfect idea. If they're walking toward a certain store, there's a good chance they might walk into it. Why not present them with more options?
Sure.
Why not give them the ability to save some money, even if it was with the competitor? I'm sorry for the other shoe store or for the other competitor, but
Sure.
The guys on the other side are using their brains. They're definitely, using their marketing tactics to make it work.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, you kind of have to innovate no matter what space you're in, right? And I think
Absolutely.
I think your industry is kind of going through a huge kind of innovation kind of thing. You mentioned earlier that, companies are kind of buying other companies, or traditional agencies are buying other companies. Like, walk us through kind of some of that transition.
Sure. So, a lot of these major world corporations or advertising agencies have some sort of division that does media buying. InOcean has their media buying units. Horizon has their media buying units. And I think that's a big play right now, because traditionally they were so far behind in terms of getting into the mobile digital advertising space.
Sure.
Where they're reluctant because they felt like, it wasn't something they could see. They don't understand the CPMs, or they don't understand, airtime. But now they're really seeing that these advertisers want to be able to track what they're doing. They want to see the performance behind it. And they're building up their teams. Perfect example was Dentsu, who purchased Fetch, and I think it was a great buy because Fetch is a strong team. They know what they're doing. They're looking at the data properly, and they're
Sure.
protecting their clients that way, and they're having the big brand of Dentsu behind them. So that's slowly what's going on in the industry, where these larger traditional agencies are looking to build their own teams or buy medium buying units or agencies or whatnot. And I think it's a good way to go.
No, that's interesting. So you don't have to name kind of clients, but do you want to kind of maybe give me and the listener kind of some examples of some types of campaigns that have kind of worked or consistently work? Like kind of walk us through kind of that stuff. And you don't, like I said, you don't need to name like we did this for this company,
Sure.
but like how, like what do you guys kind of traditionally maybe start somebody off with, and maybe say like the vertical, like if they're in software or they're a mobile game or something like that.
Sure. So mobile gaming is probably the bread and butter of this industry, mainly because mobile gaming companies, they continually spend. They're
Right.
constantly spending, whether it's with one partner, 50 partners, they're constantly spending.
Okay.
And so, Tab does pretty well on that because we took, some early adopters and we've collected data and worked with them and figured out that for the gaming industry, mainly hardcore, mid-core games, we've done pretty well. We've kind
Okay.
of figured that out.
Okay.
But we also have branding clients as well that we work with that are, working off the CPA model. And these are like, very large internet streaming companies, or they're very large, TV/internet companies as well that kind of see a little bit differently. And they use a cost per subscription model where basically they pay on every time someone subscribes.
Okay. Interesting.
So there's various ways that partners pay, and there's various ways that we work with these partners based upon what they're looking for.
Okay. No, that makes sense. So is there kind of a rough budget that people should kind of come to Tab with, or does it really depend on what they're trying to do?
Yeah, it depends on what they're trying to do. I mean, some of the partners, they'll pay out, for example, like a large amount of money per install.
Okay.
And if they have, for example, $1,000 budget, they're probably gonna get like like a few, maybe like in the 20s installs, and it's not going to be enough data for them to kind of track to see our performance.
Got you.
So we like to start off with 10,000, mainly because it's a good number for us to collect enough data to better serve the clients, but also in order for the client to see how they're, how Tab does for them.
Yeah.
But the client will know right away within the first 24 to 48 hours if it's good or not. I mean, the marketers nowadays are extremely savvy. They're technologically advanced, and I give it up to them because I used to be on their side. That they definitely know what they're doing. They definitely can see if you're trying to pull one over on them. So yeah, definitely that's the way.
No, I 100% agree with you. It's interesting because you need a certain amount of data to kind of actually give you real results, right? To your point, like if you get 20 installs, you're like, well, that doesn't tell you anything about anything, really, right? Like,
right.
So, no, that's interesting. So, I'm curious though. You've kind of mentioned it throughout the show a little bit that you have kind of clients that sometimes go that are like constantly going, but I'm curious to know, is it really kind of dependent on industry? Like it's probably when a new game comes out, they heavily kind of spend and then they might continue, or maybe they hit their targets and they kind of just like, okay, well, now we're launching another game, so maybe we'll cut back the first game's budget a little bit because it's kind of rolling and people have heard of it, and then we'll spend more on kind of the new game? Or do they kind of consistently spend the same for both games as they kind of launch new ones, or how does that kind of work?
Yeah, I mean, from my experience and from what I remember and dealing with a lot of clients, they launch games, and if it doesn't work, if they don't hit their criteria within the first couple months, they pretty much kill the game.
Kill it. Okay.
Whether they have another game in the background ready to spend, or whether they have an existing one, it all varies. But typically, like a successful gaming publisher will have one game. If it does well, they continue to spend just to keep that trajectory going. They may not spend as much, but they'll definitely spend to keep that pretty consistent. With a new game, they'll do these burst campaigns where they spend all this money up front, and hopefully gain enough traction to bring organic users in to kind of expand on that. But there's a lot of games that look great in the beginning and then fail miserably. So, it's that data play again, where you collect the data, you figure things out, and then they decide to spend there or not. But to answer your question, there's so many ways that people spend. There's continual spend, there's, periodic spend, there's bursting and sustaining, there's different avenues for sure.
Okay. And then you guys would work with somebody to kind of decide what to try based on kind of whether they're just launching and they've been around for a while or whatever, and anywhere kind of in between?
Sure. So, we'll give us their best suggestions based upon what we've seen in our platform. And we'll make suggestions, but it's ultimately up to them. We give them the data. They pretty much know how it looks. And that pretty much sets a tone for their game and how much they can pay.
Sure.
Because I think one thing that people have realized is whenever there's a big gaming guy or a big spend in the market, and they're willing to spend these high number of dollars on the CPI, it destroys the market for everybody else.
Right.
Or it doesn't destroy it, but you have to keep up to get the same amount of impressions or clicks or looks or whatever it may be, and it just perpetuates that increasing price for CPI or for impressions. And so that pretty much helps determine how much they spend and how long they spend for.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm kind of curious to see, I don't necessarily need you to tell anything crazy, but where do you kind of see the platform going for you guys? Because you guys do obviously a lot of kind of advertising and mobile stuff, but are you guys going to stick in that kind of space? Are you kind of adding some new stuff in 2018, or where do you kind of see the platform going?
Sure. So, we're building out tools constantly for internal. We want to do something external for our user base to utilize, but we've realized that there's so many players out in the market doing the same thing.
Okay.
So we're going to keep the traditional way and maybe introduce some tools for our users.
Okay.
However, internally we're building out new optimization tools, fraud analytics tools, trying to build out some more data processing units like a DMP or SSP. We're constantly building toward that full stack in order for us to have full transparency and to pass that on to our partners.
No, that's interesting, right? Because the data kind of doesn't lie, and I get that you can kind of interpret data and skew it sometimes, but it's really hard for somebody to argue if you're like, we got you 1,000 installs or whatever that number is, right? And here's where the sources all came from, right? And if you have that data, then, it's up to them to decide what they want to potentially do with that data or keep going or not or whatever. But I think that's actually really kind of innovative in itself, because even I find sometimes with where this show kind of airs, sometimes the numbers they give you on some stuff is can be really accurate or kind of somewhere way out in left field, and it's kind of up to you to do your own kind of work and analytics and to try to figure that out, right? Where somebody like you guys, if you could say I got you 1,000 installs or 10,000 installs and here's where they're all from, and I just show that to the CEO or whatever, or whoever makes the decision, you're just yeah, that's how do you argue with that, right?
Sure. Yeah. Mind you, there are ways to trick the system, but from our point of view, it's we'll give you as much data as you want. You can set as many benchmarks as you want. You can set in as many restrictions as you want, and we'll gladly abide by them. One of the things that always comes up in this industry is what they call CTIT, or click to install time.
Okay.
And we always tell our advertisers, hey, if it's not us, if it's somebody else, make sure that you send minimum requirements. Make sure that you can send restrictions, and we'll follow them. And if if another partner doesn't, I would probably pull away from them and try to go to someone that's willing to do that for you, because there's a lot of us in the market, and the ones that are willing to do that are probably the ones that you want to keep around.
So no, I 100% agree. So you can tell, like, your platform will tell me how long it took for somebody to install the app on their phone or game on their phone. Is that fair?
So yeah, so most attribution partners, they'll give you that information from the click to the install.
Okay.
You'll see if it takes, if you just, like, for example, see a banner and you click on it and you go to the store and install it.
Yeah.
If it's 5 seconds, then there's something definitely wrong. It could be a bot. It could be something fraudulent, because
got you.
the human cannot click and install the app that quickly, right?
Right.
Where if you set certain time frames, you can say, for example, we can, in our system, we can set that there has to be a minimum of this, and any install that kind of squeaks through, we disregard. Even though install happens, we just tell them, you don't have to pay for that. You only have to pay for the ones that you want, based upon the restrictions that you set ahead of time.
Okay.
So
interesting.
That all comes from the attribution tracking system. So they see it and we see it.
Got you. Okay. No, that's actually quite fascinating, right? Because you're right. Like, if or especially if the game's, like, I don't know, 100 meg or something, like, which can happen. That obviously it's going to take maybe a minute or two to get that, maybe a bit longer depending on where they are, if they're on cellular data or on Wi-Fi or whatnot, right? That's actually quite fascinating. Yeah. So I'm curious to maybe dive a little bit deeper into some of that. Like, is there any other kind of rules that people can kind of set up, in your platform that allow people kind of that much kind of data?
Sure. So, we tell all our advertisers pretty much the same thing, and this is for anybody that does UA or getting to UA. If they don't pass you the information, if you can't see the information, just set the restrictions.
Okay.
The good thing about the attribution tracking system is they're really there to protect the advertiser. They're there to give the advertiser enough data to make their own decisions. There's a lot of attribution partners that even do the work for you and reject certain installs, or they'll tell you that it looks suspicious.
Okay.
And then you can make the ultimate determination or dig deeper into it to see if that's correct or incorrect.
Okay. Interesting.
But I think, for any UA person, setting click to install times, setting click caps, minimum conversion percentages will help kind of thwart potential fraud. And I think that's really important moving forward for everybody.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I think as the industry kind of gets better and more tools and stuff and more data come in, the actual fraud is going to, it will probably never go away 100%, but it'll probably be as close to zero as it's ever been, right? At least in kind of the online advertising space.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of, the big topic nowadays is fraud and how to combat fraud. There's all these programs and certifications for people to verify and ingest data to make sure that they're being legitimate.
Right.
And as with all the shakeup that's going on, it's changed the advertising space. There's a lot of smaller, ad networks or affiliates that are dropping off because they can't keep up because of the changes. And there's guys like a Tab, which is basically just growing, mainly because we know that those pitfalls occur.
Sure.
So that's a good thing, because it definitely is a shakeup in the industry, and it's kind of paving the way for everybody to kind of start playing even, so to speak.
Right. So do you guys have any plans ever to kind of move your technology back into kind of the physical world with something kind of like a billboard or kind of the physical space, or is it really too challenging to actually kind of track some of that stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot of players that say they can track it. However, unless it's OTT, it's really difficult. But what I see nowadays, especially since mobile is predominantly the medium that people want to go to, it's always going to be within that space of mobile. You can track it, you can collect information. Where billboards, as you know, back in the day, they used to have this little rubber strip on the street,
right,
to see how many cars were passing by to get an idea if the billboard was effective or not. But you can never truly track how it's doing. So
Sure.
I don't really see a slowdown from the mobile space and going back to billboard. I just don't see it happening.
Okay, but could you use the mobile phone to track how many people drive by a certain billboard on like a busy street? Or is that not really there yet? Or maybe it'll never be there?
Mm, no, that's not there yet. I mean, what I mean by that is the mobile phone will always be able to collect more information than a billboard would. Um,
Okay, I see what you mean.
right,
Yeah, got you. Okay.
right. Where it's always going to be, you can collect more information, you can collect more data, and you can kind of validate if something happened or not. Where, as I said, mobile and billboards, you'll get branding, you get people to look at and say, "Oh, I'm interested,"
Sure.
but they'll always visit a website. They'll always,
Yeah, okay.
install an app to make sure, and that definitely is more valuable, I think, at the moment.
No, I 100% agree because I guess it doesn't really matter if I'm driving down, say, Sunset and I see a ad for I don't know, like a purse or something. I'm not the target market for that, right? Unless I guess I'm buying for my wife. But like,
Yeah,
right? But like, you could send me a more targeted ad, while I'm browsing the internet on my phone or computer, than me just driving by a billboard. No, that makes a lot of sense. That's interesting. I,
yeah,
I think that's kind of a huge change kind of in the industry where I think kind of the physical world, not saying it will disappear, but people are going to spend more money targeting online because they know they can say like, I want, males or females in this range that are interested in this at this location or wherever, right? Where you're never going to
right,
get that from like a physical advertising.
right, absolutely. I mean, it's the best thing about performance marketing or online marketing is or mobile marketing is you get to see, like I said, user agent, which is like the phone that you buy. And
Right.
there's going to be a different, a Cricket wireless user is going to be way different than like, a Verizon user, so to speak, where, just the buying power and disparity of the people, it just, based on the phone makes a huge difference. And that's really critical for advertising,
Sure.
um, more than any billboard, I think.
No, I 100% agree with you. I am curious, though, to get your thoughts on. I know it's kind of been historically, I've heard anyway, and tell me if I'm wrong, that kind of
Mhm.
iPhone users are kind of considered like the most kind of high end kind of data, and kind of Android and any other kind of phone. Well, there's not really any other phone at this point, but you know what I mean. It's kind of those two, but like Apple's kind of the premium data, and then kind of Android and everybody else is kind of secondary. Is
Mhm.
that kind of still the same, or is Android kind of on par with the iPhone now, or how do you feel about that in your experience?
That's funny you should ask. We had this discussion just a couple hours ago, but
Okay.
um, yeah, the iPhone user generally is a more targeted user, and you know, it's mainly because the people that buy it. It's the cost of the phone. You have to buy an iPhone opposed to getting one for free,
Right.
or you have to sign a contract for X amount of years opposed to getting one for free.
Sure.
Also, you know, the I guess the gender is huge as well. I mean, there's more buying power for women, and women prefer to use the iPhone opposed to an Android.
Sure.
Um, so from the branding perspective, definitely so. But from the gaming perspective, it's actually opposite.
Oh,
Where
interesting.
yeah, so a lot of the Android hardcore users are Android based. So a lot of guys in Asia that use Android opposed to iOS is huge, and mainly because you know I guess the Android system dominated in Asia
Right.
a lot more than the iOS system did. So that played a huge part, and you can thank Samsung for that. So
Yeah, fair. Because even I think in South America, like Samsung's like just dominates compared to like Apple's almost like people are like, what is that phone? Where like
right,
it's the reverse in North America, right? Like people are like, what phone is that? Like how come that's not an iPhone, right? And I'm an Android
right,
user, I have an iPhone too, but like so I understand that kind of, but it's just interesting how certain parts of the world like you wouldn't target an iPhone user unless you want specific thing, and vice versa. You wouldn't target Android if in certain parts of the world because it just doesn't exist, really, right?
right. I mean, perfect example is the geo plays a huge part. Perfect example is China. Everybody wants to go to China and
Okay.
market there, and the success with 1 billion people would be in China. However, because there's so many like different platforms and markets, as Tencent, Google is like practically not really there yet.
Right.
There's all these different platforms, and they use Android, but they can't make traction. However, like in China, you can use iPhone and target pretty well, and you can get some traction there because it's a single market. It's all owned by Apple, and no one can build their own market around that. So it really depends on the geo, the income class levels, what's free, what's not, and like you mentioned, iPhone is predominant in the U.S., probably UK and parts of Europe, where in Asia it's just pretty much all about Android.
Interesting. And I think the other thing too is even in some of kind of the emerging markets, I think Android and Google's done a lot better job at building phones for those kind of markets, right? Like Google has the One phone and other people and are kind of playing in that space where Apple hasn't really focused on that. And some people might crucify me for saying that, but like in my opinion, they really haven't focused on building anything other than like high-end hardware.
Right. I mean, it's very typical of Apple where, they target a certain type of user.
Yeah.
I mean, I love my MacBook. I mean, I'll never part with it. I'll never go back to PC. However, it's like when it comes to certain things like phones or whatnot, that's something that, you use as a daily convenience. And guys in India or these emerging markets like we've discussed just don't have the money to do that.
Sure.
Where Android pretty much had an open Android software where anybody could use it, and it's gotten them a lot of traction.
Yeah.
It's gotten them a lot of market share in the world, actually.
Yeah, and to be fair, you can run Android without the Google stuff. Like if you run, this is going to get really nerdy, but just I'm trying to get people to think about it. Like if you install a custom ROM that wasn't built by Google, it was like you and I could release a custom ROM and we could call it, Tabs Android or whatever we call it, right?
Right.
And you have to actually side load, like you install the OS and then you have to actually install the Google apps from a separate zip file, right? So you can actually run Android without Google, which I don't think a lot of people understand what that really kind of means, right? So you don't even need Google to run Android, which is kind of a weird concept.
Right.
So some of those markets actually don't run some of the Google stuff on their weird versions of Android. And I shouldn't say weird, but I mean weird in the sense of they're not really Google Android, right? Like Android's obviously built by Google, but they're not really running like Gmail or the Play Store or all that stuff, which I think a lot of people don't know or consider in some of these markets.
Sure. I mean, it's not just different markets. Actually, the U.S. as well is like perfect example is the Amazon Fire.
Yeah, totally.
That's Google based. I mean, that's an Android based system. However, they made it their own.
Yeah.
And they started marketing it. BlackBerry is another company that's starting to do that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, they're far in between gone, but at this point,
fair.
But it's good for a lot of emerging markets because Google's not present there or they don't have the payment system, so they release these ROMs or APKs where you can get involved and you can still use and play games or use products. So that's what's amazing about Google. Where iOS, it's a great product. I don't knock it.
Yeah.
However, it's just very closed and
Sure.
it's specifically made for Apple users. Yeah.
No, I 100% agree, but sadly we're kind of coming to the end of the show, so let's maybe close with where people can get more information about Tab and any other kind of social media links you want to mention.
Sure, absolutely. So you can find us at tab.company. That's our website. You can see, what we do, about us, the product that we have and who we work with. And also you can visit us on our Facebook site. There's plenty of pictures about the culture of Tab. We have this great series called Life of Tab that highlights our employees and what they like about it. But also, we've got LinkedIn, which is probably the primary for the business world. And
Sure.
Please feel free to hit any of us up. Email us, Skype us. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions or concerns or comments. And we encourage and welcome it.
No, I 100% agree. And if I remember correctly, I think you and I connected originally on LinkedIn.
Right.
So, like,
great tool.
I reached out to you and was like, hey, I like what you're doing. Are you interested in doing the show? And obviously we're doing the show. So it does work, right? To your point a second ago,
Right.
I think that's a really good tool. But Scott, I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show. And I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day, man.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. We'll talk soon. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit the show's website at buildingthefutureshow.com. Also check us out on Facebook at Building the Future Show and follow us on Twitter at Building Show. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.